The rain fell in sheets, hammering the cracked pavement outside Dixie's diner like it was trying to wash the world clean. The neon sign flickered, casting a pink and blue glow across the empty parking lot in Atlanta's West End. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions, and the hum of an old jukebox played a soulful tune nobody was listening to. Maya Jackson wiped her hands on her apron, her braids swinging as she leaned against the counter. It was 10:47 p.m., 13 minutes to closing, and the diner was dead except for one guy nursing a Coke in the corner booth. At 26, Maya was used to late shifts, used to the ache in her feet and the way her back protested after 12 hours on the move. She'd been working at Dixie since she was 18, scraping by to keep the lights on in the tiny apartment she shared with her 12-year-old brother Jamal. Their mama had passed 3 years ago, and their daddy, well, he'd never been in the picture. It was just them, always had been. She glanced at the clock, then at the guy in the booth. He was new, not one of the regulars who shuffled in for cheap eggs and bottomless coffee. His clothes were ragged, a threadbare coat hanging off his thin frame, and his gray hair was matted from the rain. He hadn't ordered food, just the Coke, which he sipped so slowly it was like he was trying to make it last forever. Maya's boss, Reggie, would have kicked him out by now. No loiterers, Maya. You know the rules. But Reggie was in the back counting the till, and Maya wasn't heartless. She'd seen enough folks down on their luck to know the look. Hunger wasn't just an empty stomach. It was a weight in the eyes. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. She straightened, expecting a last-minute customer, but it was just the wind pushing the door open. Rain gusted in, pooling on the linoleum. Maya sighed and grabbed a rag to mop it up, but as she crossed the diner, she noticed the old man in the booth slump forward, his head hitting the table with a soft thud. The Coke glass tipped, spilling across the formica. "Hey," Maya called, dropping the rag. She hurried over, her sneakers squeaking on the wet floor. "Sir, you okay?" No response. His face was pressed against the table, one arm dangling limp. Her heart kicked up, a cold prickle running down her spine. She'd taken a CPR class years ago when Jamal was little, but that was a lifetime away. Still, she didn't think. She acted. She slid into the booth, easing the man upright. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow and ragged. His lips were tinged blue. "Reggie!" she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the jukebox croon. "Call 911, now!" Reggie poked his head out from the back, frowning. "What's going on?" "He's having a heart attack or something. Call Reggie, please." Reggie cursed under his breath but grabbed the phone. Maya tilted the man's head back, checking his airway like she vaguely remembered from that class. Her hands shook as she pressed 2 fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint and uneven, like a bird fluttering against a cage. She didn't know what else to do, so she started chest compressions, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. The man's face was gaunt, his cheeks sunken, but there was something about him, a quiet dignity, even in his frailty, that made her chest ache. She didn't know his story, didn't know his name, but she wasn't going to let him die. Not here, not tonight. "Come on," she whispered, pressing harder. "Stay with me." The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later, red and blue lights slicing through the rain. Paramedics stormed in, their boots tracking mud across the floor. Maya stepped back, her arms trembling from the compressions as they took over. They hooked the man to monitors, shouting terms she didn't understand. Visifib, defibrillator, stat. One of them, a woman with a tight ponytail, glanced at Maya. "You did CPR?" she asked, not looking up from the man's chest. "Yeah," Maya said, her voice hoarse. "I think so. Kept him alive long enough for us to get here." "Good work." Maya nodded, but she didn't feel good. She felt like she was going to throw up. The paramedics loaded the man onto a stretcher, his body looking smaller under the blanket they draped over him. As they wheeled him out, One of them turned to her. "You know him?" "No," Maya said. "Just saw him collapse." The paramedic nodded, then handed her a slip of paper. "Hospital's number, if you want to check on him." She took it, folding it into her apron pocket without looking. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the siren wailed as it sped off into the night. Reggie appeared beside her, arms crossed. "You okay, kid?" he asked, softer than usual. "Yeah," she lied. "Just shaken up." He clapped her shoulder. "Go home. I'll close up." Maya didn't argue. She grabbed her jacket, the hospital's number burning a hole in her pocket, and stepped into the rain. The cold bit into her skin, but she barely noticed. All she could see was the old man's face, the way his eyes had fluttered open for a split second during her compressions, like he was trying to say something. Back at her apartment, Jamal was asleep on the couch, a math textbook open on his chest. Maya smiled despite herself, tucking a blanket over him. She didn't wake him. She didn't want to explain why her hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection, her brown eyes wide and haunted. She'd saved a life tonight. Maybe, but it didn't feel like enough. She pulled the slip of paper from her pocket and dialed the hospital's number. A tired-sounding nurse answered. "I'm calling about the man who came in from Dixie's diner," Maya said. "Older guy, gray hair, heart attack maybe?" "We can't give out details unless you're family," the nurse said, not unkindly. "But he's stable. That's all I can say." Stable. The word was a lifeline. Maya thanked her and hung up, sinking onto the edge of her bed. She didn't know why she cared so much about a stranger. Maybe it was because she saw her mama in him, the way she'd fought to hold on in those final days. Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe she just wanted to believe one good thing could happen in a world that felt so heavy. The next day, Maya was back at the diner, pouring coffee for truckers and dodging Reggie's grumbling about the mud still tracked across the floor. She kept thinking about the old man, wondering if he was awake, if he had anyone to sit by his bed. During her break, she called the hospital again. Same nurse, same answer. Stable, but no details unless you're family. By the third day, she couldn't take it anymore. She clocked out early, telling Reggie she had an errand, and took the bus to Atlanta General. The hospital smelled like bleach and despair, the kind of place that made you want to hold your breath. At the front desk, she gave the only description she had. Older black man, gray hair, brought in from Dixie's diner. The receptionist frowned at her screen. "No name listed, just John Doe. Room 314, but I just want to see if he's okay," Maya cut in. "Please." The receptionist sighed but waved her through. Maya took the elevator, her stomach twisting. What was she even doing? She wasn't family, wasn't anything to this man. But her feet kept moving, carrying her to room 314. The door was ajar. Inside, the man lay in a hospital bed, tubes snaking from his arm to a beeping machine. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Maya hesitated, then stepped inside, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. "Hi," she said softly, feeling foolish. "I don't know if you can hear me. I'm the one who... You were at the diner. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." His eyes fluttered open, pale and watery, but sharp. He studied her, and for a moment, she thought he might speak. But he just nodded, a small, tired gesture, and closed his eyes again. Maya stood there, unsure what to do next. A nurse bustled in, checking the chart at the foot of the bed. "You his daughter?" she asked. "No," Maya said. I was there when it happened." The nurse raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "He's lucky you were. Another few minutes and..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "He's got no ID, no next of kin listed. Social workers coming tomorrow to figure out what's what." Maya nodded, her throat tight. She glanced at the man, John Doe they called him, and made a decision. "Can I come back?" Just to check on him. "Suit yourself," the nurse said, already moving to the next room. Over the next week, Maya visited every day after her shift. She'd sit by John Doe's bed, sometimes talking, sometimes just watching the rise and fall of his chest. She told him about Jamal's science fair project, about the time she burned a whole tray of biscuits at the diner, about how she used to dream of being a nurse before life got in the way. He rarely spoke, but his eyes followed her, and sometimes he'd smile, a small, crooked thing that made her feel like she was doing something right. The hospital staff got used to her. They stopped asking if she was family, just nodded when she showed up with a thermos of soup or a dog-eared paperback she'd read to him. The social worker hadn't found anything. No records, no relatives. It was like the man had fallen out of the sky. One evening, as Maya was reading him a chapter from Their Eyes Were Watching God, he spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "You don't have to keep coming," he said. Maya paused, lowering the book. "I know, but I want to." He looked at her, his eyes searching. "Why?" She thought about it, really thought. "'Cause I know what it's like to feel alone, and I don't want you to." He didn't say anything else, but the next day he started talking more. Little things at first, how he liked the soup, how the hospital coffee was worse than the diners. Then bigger things, how he'd grown up in Savannah, how he'd always loved the sound of the ocean. He never mentioned family, never said how he'd ended up on the streets. Maya didn't push. She just listened. She started bringing Jamal along sometimes, figuring it'd do her brother good to see what kindness looked like. Jamal was shy at first, but he warmed up, showing the man, whose name they still didn't know, his drawings or telling him about the planets he was studying. The old man's face would light up, and Maya would catch glimpses of someone who hadn't always been broken. 3 weeks after the heart attack, the hospital discharged John Doe to a shelter. Maya helped him pack his few belongings, a donated jacket, a pair of socks, the paperback she'd been reading him. She wrote her number on a scrap of paper and tucked it into his pocket. "If you need anything," she said, "anything at all." He nodded, his hand closing around the paper like it was something precious. "You're a good girl, Maya," he said, the first time he'd used her name. She smiled, blinking back tears. "Take care of yourself, okay?" He didn't come back to the diner, and for a while Maya thought that was the end of it. She went back to her routine, slinging plates, helping Jamal with homework, dodging bills she couldn't quite pay. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something, that there was more to the man than he'd let on. Then one morning, a man in a suit walked into Dixie's. He was tall, white, with slicked back hair, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He asked for Maya by name. "I'm Daniel Hargrove," he said, sliding a business card across the counter. "Attorney, I represent a client who'd like to meet with you." Maya frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Me? Why?" "It's about the man you helped, the one from the hospital." Her heart skipped. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," Hargrove said, his tone clipped. "He'd just like to thank you in person. Tomorrow, if you're free." Maya hesitated. Something about the guy set her nerves on edge. But she couldn't say no. Not if it was about him. She agreed, and Hargrove gave her an address downtown, a glass tower that screamed money. The next day, she borrowed a dress from her cousin and took the bus to the address. The building was all marble and chrome, the kind of place that made her feel small. A receptionist led her to a conference room where Hargrove waited with another man, older, white, with a tailored suit and a hawkish face. And there, at the head of the table, was John Doe. Except he wasn't John Doe anymore. He was clean-shaven, his gray hair neatly trimmed, his ragged coat replaced by a suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year. He stood when she entered, his eyes bright with something she couldn't name. "Maya," he said, his voice stronger now, "I owe you my life." His name was Elias Warren, and he was worth $12 billion, a tech mogul who'd built an empire in the 90s, then vanished from public life after a series of scandals. Divorce, lawsuits, a son who died too young. He'd spent the last decade wandering, living among the unhoused, hiding from a world that had chewed him up and spit him out. The heart attack had been a wake-up call, and Maya's kindness had been the spark that brought him back. "I didn't tell you who I was," Elias said, sitting across from her in the conference room, "because I didn't know if I could trust it. People change when they smell money." Maya stared at him, her mind reeling. The man she'd read to, the man she'd fed soup, was a billionaire. It didn't make sense. But his eyes, those same sharp, searching eyes, told her it was true. "I don't want your money," she said finally. "I helped you because it was right." Elias smiled, that crooked smile she'd grown to love. "I know. That's why I'm here." He told her he wanted to repay her, not with a check, but with a future. He'd already set up a trust for Jamal's education, full ride, any college he wanted. He was giving Maya the diner, free and clear, with enough capital to renovate it or sell it or do whatever she dreamed. And he wanted her to run a foundation he was starting, one to help people like him, people the world had forgotten. "I can't," Maya started, her voice breaking. "I'm just a waitress." "You're more than that," Elias said. "You saw me when no one else did." Hargrove slid a stack of papers across the table, but Maya barely glanced at them. She was looking at Elias, at the man who'd been a stranger and was now something else entirely. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Maya took over the diner, renaming it Mama's Place in honor of her mother. She hired more staff, started a free meal program for anyone who couldn't pay. Jamal aced his science fair, his eyes shining when Maya told him college was covered. And the foundation, Warren's Way, grew, opening shelters, funding job programs, giving people a second chance. Elias became a fixture in her life, not as a billionaire, but as a friend. He'd stop by the diner, sipping coffee and telling stories about his son, about the mistakes he'd made. Maya listened, just like she always had, and slowly he started to heal. One evening, as they sat in the diner after closing, Elias handed her a small box. Inside was a locket, engraved with the words, "To Maya, who saw me." "You don't owe me anything," she said, her voice soft. "I know," he said, "but you deserve everything." Maya smiled, slipping the locket around her neck. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the neon sign glowed steady and bright. Maya never forgot that cold night, the night she chose kindness over indifference. It wasn't just Elias's life that changed. It was hers, Jamal's, and countless others who walked through the doors of Mama's Place. She learned that wealth isn't money. It's the courage to care, even when the world tells you not to. So here's my call to you, the viewer. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to see more stories that remind us what really matters. Because kindness, it's the richest thing we've got. Thank you for watching.